Hi there, and welcome to You Don't Know Her, the mindset podcast all about creating the best future for yourself, one by design and not by default. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the fantastic singer-songwriter, artist, Jack Critchlow. How are you doing, Jack?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, really good, yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and yeah, thanks for coming on. So,
No problem.
first of all, just to kind of give a brief overview of yourself, you've been quite established for a number of years now into music, but do you want to kind of talk about where you're at the moment and kind of how you've got to the kind of musical side?
Yeah, well, I've been doing music my whole life, been writing songs since I was 11 years old, and now I'm a full-time artist, songwriter, producer. I properly committed to doing it when I was about 18. I moved to Manchester and became basically a full-time musician, and basically just put in my 10,000 hours to the point now where I write, produce everything that I release myself, and I do that for a lot of other artists. And I put out music as well, and I've had some success over the last couple of years, getting some songs on Radio 1, Radio X, playing some cool shows around the UK. But it's a long journey, so I'm still going and still working at it, but every kind of month there's a step in the right direction, and it's got to keep going and keep grafting, and hopefully I'll get there. But yeah, that's me.
That's amazing, yeah. So you've mentioned obviously journey there, and that's a whole point of what this podcast stands for.
Yeah.
It's kind of people seeing that progress, and you mentioned month to month, and it's something that I do myself. I journal, or I kind of record what I've done this month kind of thing and look back at my achievements. Is that...
Yeah.
Do you kind of do that? I mean, we're coming up to the end of the year now, into the new year. Is that something you'll look back at and say, how was my 2024 been? Is that something you might do yourself?
Yeah, I do. I tend to do, at the end of the year, I like to do like a couple posts on social media just to look back on everything that I've done. I think it's difficult, especially in your up and coming phase as a musician, to look back rather than look forward, because you're constantly chasing that next thing. You don't look back at what you've done, which I really struggle with, and I think is, I know some people who are really good at that, and I respect them for being able to do that, because I find it difficult to kind of celebrate what I've done, because I'm constantly looking at the next thing, which is probably quite unhealthy at times. But I do like to especially look back at a year and be like, you know, look at the thing, look how far I've come from where I was.
Yeah.
And things like being played on Radio 1 and stuff like that are like landmarks that I can look back at. But I think, you know, looking forward, it's definitely something I should improve at, because with music and being an artist and trying to find success, you're constantly chasing. And I don't think it ever stops. I mean, even big artists, then there's always the next level up. You're always looking at someone else who's bigger or done something that you want to do.
Yeah.
So I do think it's definitely something I want to work at, is trying to look back and actually think, you know, I'm doing all right here, or I've done things that 4 years ago I'd look at now and be like, oh wow, look what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So it is something I should get better at, and I want to get better at. So that's my 2025 goal, is to sort of hone in on that a bit more, I think.
Yeah, it's an important goal. I think it's important a lesson to have for people to... A lot of people do chase that kind of thing, the end goal, to not stop and enjoy the journey along the way.
Yeah.
So it's great that you've got the mixture of looking back to say where I've come from, then the present day of, wow, it's great, you know, I'm on radio and everything like that, but then also a little bit of goal setting as well. So, but to take you right back to the start of the journey then, even before you've probably, I mean, were you playing instruments from a young age? Kind of, how did that all start?
I started playing, well, allegedly I started singing before I taught. It's the story my parents tell, but that's obviously, I feel like they're going to say that. It's sort of something you'd see in a documentary in like 10 years. Oh, he could sing before he could talk, all that. But yeah, so I was singing from a very young age. I started playing guitar when I was 10. I bought a guitar and started going to lessons. I initially hated lessons and doing grades and stuff. It just wasn't for me. So I was actually close to stopping when I was young, because I was kind of being forced down that path a little bit. And then I just got into songwriting, really, because that's kind of what I wanted to do from when I picked up a guitar. Was I loved writing songs. I had artists that I wanted to be like, and I just got into that, really. And then when I was 11, I wrote a song about the Syrian refugee crisis, which ended up doing quite well in terms of it got a bit of exposure. It got on radio and on BBC News and stuff like that, which was kind of my first shot, or sort of sight of, oh, actually this could lead to something. But I was 11, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know, I was kind of living in a fantasy world where I had one moment of what seemed like fame to me. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a big artist and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a long journey, and I'm 10 years on from that now, and still it's a long journey.
Yeah.
But I think I was lucky that I was pushed into it at a young age, and I'm surrounded by a musical family, so I was kind of constantly embracing that kind of music side to my family, and if I hadn't been for that, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. So
yeah, and not just probably the musical side. I mean, you mentioned family, but I'm assuming they probably had a part to play in the Syrian knowledge as well.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
Is that something?
Well, it's basically my dad I have to thank for that, because I remember I was in my room and I was trying to write something, I think, and he said, "Why didn't you write about things that are in the news, things that mean something?" Because I didn't have a lot to write about. A young 11-year-old's brain isn't really thinking about all these, girls and love and all this stuff that you hear in songs nowadays. But and so the main thing in the news at the moment was the Syrian refugee crisis. So I was like, okay, that's something to start with. And I remember it was mainly about one picture of this boy called Aylan Kurdi who'd washed up on a beach, and he was the same age as me at the time. So that's where the song came from. And I guess because I was 11-year-old singing about this stuff, that's kind of what made it stick, is that actually, what's this 11-year-old doing talking about these kind of complex world problems? So I have my dad to thank for that. But I also have my dad to thank, we were talking about earlier, when we went on the radio to talk about it, my dad came out and said, instead of writing songs about girlfriends he hasn't had yet, why doesn't he write songs about Syrian refugees? And I was like, at the time, I was like, yeah, but that came back to bite me a few years later when I've discovered girls, and suddenly I had this thing that will live forever, which is my dad basically taking the mick out of me not writing songs about girls. But oh well.
Yeah, it's all how you get there, I think, and you're gonna have your critics, and it's gonna people are gonna poke. But I was a songwriter, but I didn't properly learn guitar until my mid-20s, basically.
Right.
Like, that's when I finally really got there. But I was always interested in lyrics and kind of like writing and things like that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was about I must have been about 12-year-old or something. I wrote this love song, and I showed it to my mum, and I was convinced it was going to be a #1 hit.
Yeah.
Like, and it was. Look back at it now, it probably had no melody. It was just terrible.
Well, we've all been there. I listen back to stuff I did when I was that age. I'm like, God.
Yeah.
What was I thinking? How did I think I was going to be a famous musician at 12 years old?
Yeah.
But it's a learning process.
Yeah, you've got to have those moments to get you to where you are now. So
yeah.
now that you look at your current stuff, I mean, is it Rely On as your most recent?
My most recent, yeah.
So how does that kind of compare to your previous work? Is that and kind of what are you proudest of? Is it the more recent things?
I think. Well, I've got a lot of new music that's coming out. My last two songs, Bleeding and Rely On, are kind of the first chunk of that new music. And I think it's very different to what I was doing at 12 years old when I wrote that song. But I think, especially since I moved to Manchester and I've fully committed to doing music, it's been, even that period of my life has been a big learning curve as what an artist should be or what a songwriter should be. And when I moved to Manchester at 18, I kind of came from this world where it was very sheltered. I was kind of the music guy of my area, and I was kind of just writing songs because, I felt like I should be writing songs, and I wasn't, delving into the type of things I should be writing about as much. I was kind of just following what was in the mainstream and writing songs that I think I should be writing. But so a lot of the music I was doing when I was 18, 19 was just kind of what I felt like the music I should be writing was. And then when I took a bit of a step back at the start of 2024, end of 2023 into 2024, I'd just done my first UK tour, and I was kind of like, I need to actually hone into the music I want to make and say the things that I want to say in my lyrics. And, you look at Bleeding and Rely On, it's actually if you look into the lyrics, it's a very good representation of me as a person as well. Bleeding, which was the first song I put out of this chunk of music, is kind of about the struggles I'd have with love in my life, and kind of this yearning to find something or something out of love that I haven't found to this point. And Rely On is about the experience of being a musician and the hardship of being a musician, and often that takes you away from your normal kind of stereotypical 21-year-old life where you're with friends and going out and doing this. And there's still stuff that I love to do, but often I find myself away from home or having to work extra hard because it's such a difficult industry to navigate, and something you just want something to rely on that's away from that and kind of a constant, I don't know, thing that you can always come back to. So that was one difference I found recently to when I was, even just 18, is that authenticity is something that shines through as being an artist, and a lot of the music I'm going to be putting out hones into that even more, is being honest about my own life experience and not just writing songs because you think that's what they should sound like. And trying to be more honest as in yourself, because that's what people buy into. They buy into your honesty and your own character, I think. So
yeah. I think that's, I've always been drawn to any music, and I think the most successful songs are the ones that you can tell there's a clear message there and there's a clear story, whatever genre it is, doesn't. And I was actually going to ask you this because it seems like, to me, I was listening to Runaway, and I think that's, I really love that song. I think it's such a good, I use the word unapologetically pop. It's very different to Rely On. But I think both of them are very genuine. I think both of them are very, it seems to be anyway. So my question to you was, when you set out to write Runaway versus when you set out to write Rely On, did you have an idea of genre in mind, or did the song kind of...
I mean, Runaway was kind of what I was saying, is I was writing songs for what I thought I should be writing songs for. So like, lyrically, particularly in Runaway, it's not a particularly authentic song for me. It was kind of like, it wasn't about anything that was going on in my life. It was just me writing a song that I thought people would like to listen to. Whereas Rely On was me not thinking about that as much and kind of writing more from a place of actually what's going on in my life. What do I want to say in songs? And I'm not, a lot of the time when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about what, genre-wise or the sound of the song should be. That I try and let them come out naturally, and especially because I produce all the songs that I write, it's a very natural process. If you work with another producer or another songwriter and you kind of go in and you give them a reference track and you say, this is what I want it to sound like and this is my vision for it, and you kind of, the producer needs that to find this kind of middle ground between them and you. Whereas with me, because I'm kind of doing all of it, it's very much free to be. I kind of let what will be, and just kind of, I go and sit by my laptop or sit on my guitar, and what comes out comes out. So I don't plan and be like, okay, I'm going to write a really commercial, top 40 song now, and I'm going to write a really stripped back singer-songwriter song now. I don't try not to plan that too much. Depends what's going on in my life, depends what mood I'm in. I just let it flow out naturally. I think that's when the best songs come out. I think.
Completely agree, I think. So it's interesting from a production side as well, because I know that's a completely different element to a lot of artists don't tend to produce their own thing. So with, for example, Rely On, obviously it's got the rap kind of breakdown as well. Is that something that originally happens in the production? Do you have the track ready and then think, could a rap go in there, or how would that one work?
I'd done the main chorus, the verse, and I was like, I was just kind of listening to the instrumental of like what the second verse would be. And I was kind of thinking, I don't think there's anything more I could say at this point. So I have a very good friend of mine who's a rapper, his name's Josh. And I was just like interested to see his interpretation. And he just came in and literally came in about half an hour, wrote the verse, and on his own kind of idea of having something to rely on. I just thought it was interesting and gave someone else's like point of view on it. But yeah, I just thought it was a nice space for that to be in, and it kind of allowed the song to go somewhere else that wasn't just about me. It was kind of about someone else as well. But again, I wasn't like planning when I was writing the song. I wasn't thinking, okay, I'm going to put a rapper in there. It was just kind of like, it happened quite naturally, really, which I think is the best way to go. So
yeah, I think it's so common now for rappers and big pop artists to team up and things like that and explore kind of, I suppose, expose each other to each other's market basically as well, isn't it? It's kind of, it's really interesting to see kind of different takes on it. There's, I mean, for example, BTS teaming up with Coldplay is a big example of kind of BTS, huge international band, Coldplay, huge in probably different markets. So it's really cool to collaborate. So has collaboration been something that's been quite key in your journey, would you say?
Yeah, I think, especially coming into Manchester when I was 18, I hadn't really collaborated a lot with songwriters before, and I was suddenly surrounded by them. And it's something I really try to embrace because I learned so much from other people. And I think, you know, looking at me back as an 18-year-old, I don't think I was good at all. Like, and I was so, as I said before, I was so sheltered of what I thought music should be. And I actually look at a lot of people around me at that time, I think, actually they were so further ahead than where I was. And that's what I think I learned from other people was, you know, there was a big part of it I learned about working with people and collaborating and all that stuff, but I actually learned a lot about what it is to be an artist and what it is to write songs and how there's a lot more to writing songs than coming up with a catchy melody and a hook line and all this stuff. There's especially as an artist, when you're writing your own music, it's about kind of bringing out an emotion in yourself and being honest and, you know, talking about things that are going on in your own life and bringing that out of you. So yeah, I think collaboration is probably the most important thing. That's one of the most important things that's got me to where I am.
Yeah.
Because not only for my own stuff, but the stuff I do for other people is a big part of what I do. I produce for other artists and write with other artists, and I really love it because you can often, when you're on your own, think that you're always doing the right thing because you've got no one over your shoulder saying, oh, you should try this or do this.
Yeah.
Whereas when you've got that, it just allows someone to kind of offer another opinion and tell you when something's good, but also to tell you when something's less good. Or and you listen to things completely differently when someone else is there listening at the same time, and you make different choices. And so collaborating is something I love to do, and I want to keep doing as well.
Yeah, and it's saying about listening to things. I think that's what makes, because that was part of what I was told early on by a songwriter. Said, listen to the song, but listen for the drums. Like, listen for the drums, and then you were listening to the drums, and he's like, okay, now listen to it for the bass or whatever it is. Like, and it was you listen to the song so many times. And he's like, really appreciate every individual part that goes into that, and then again, but as listening, as a collaborator, as someone, you know, you're a very young guy, but even talking about Rely On and everything that went to that, you're clearly kind of listening to what's going on around you. So it might not even just be musical collaborations. It might be chatting to your mates in a pub. Is that true to yourself, do you think?
I think so. And I think it's important as an artist to surround yourself with good people who can bring that out of you. And I think the healthiest thing as a musician I've found is to have people around you who take you away from music. And, you know, I have a lot of close friends who are musicians, but I also have a lot of close friends who aren't. And I think it's really healthy to have that around you where you escape from the music world for a bit, whether when you socialise with friends or when you go and, you know, play a sport or you go and do whatever. To take your mind away from it, because often that brings out a lot of inspiration, and I found myself get trapped in the music world a lot because it can be a very claustrophobic, you know, judgmental world, especially when you're up and coming. You're constantly comparing yourself to other people and drawing what other people are doing on social media. You're taking other people's social media ideas and all this, not taking them, but like you're taking inspiration from them. Whereas you go and you escape. You know, just last night, for example, I was back with all my schoolmates who don't do anything to do with music, and you just talk about normal stuff, and you escape from that a bit, and you suddenly it's a breath of fresh air, and I find that a lot with hanging out with mates, but also doing things outside of music. You know, I play a lot of tennis, and I go and do something that takes my mind completely away from it, and I think I'm not necessarily getting song inspiration from playing tennis. But it's refreshing my mind. It's going into things from a different point of view, and I think if you're constantly thinking about music, constantly thinking about songwriting, it can become a bit much. So I think I'm not drawing inspiration from other things, but it's just allowing my mind to have a break and to think about other things, which I think means that I can come into songwriting with a bit of a fresher point of view when I do that stuff. So I think it's important, definitely.
I 100% agree. I'm actually a very keen tennis player myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
Love a game.
Yeah, well, I think. I completely agree that it's just something so different and removed, but it just gives you that fresh air, a bit of mental clarity to go right and just focus on just the ball. Like that's all I'm thinking about for the next like 2 hours or whatever. And it just gives you a completely different way of thinking. But I can't believe we're here already. But we're at the end of the end of the shoot. So thank you very much for everything. So my last question for you is, if people do want to learn more about you or see you, where can they find you? Where can you find you?
Well, just check me out on social media. It's Jack_Critchlow. I should be talking to a camera, but Jack_Critchlow on Instagram and TikTok, and Jack Critchlow on Spotify or Apple Music, whichever DSP people use. But yeah, Jack Critchlow. I appreciate the follow and the stream of my music. Would be great. But no, thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Appreciate it.